an extraordinary artist. He plays what's called the king of instruments, though many people think it's a big, noisy device that's somehow associated with death and religion. His particular mission is to popularize this instrument and to make it available to a much larger audience than the relatively small community of cognoscenti who are currently deeply involved in the music of the organ. His name is Cameron Carpenter, and I invite him to come out on stage and dazzle us. Here he is. Carpenter. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here and play for you. And I'd like to say that following Jamie Matthews is actually incredibly exciting and fitting, in the sense that the piece I'm going to play for you is, for me, one of the absolute portals to a sense of the musical humanity in the greatest scale, and the images of outer space implications, the pioneering of Vera Rubin, and all of this, to me, is totally in keeping with the musical message of this, which is profound and, to me, utterly triumphant. By J.S. Bach, the musical masterpiece and pillar, the Chaconne, originally written for violin and now redone by me for the organ.
There you go. Cameron, first standing ovation of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. So, Cameron Live, you want to get that in the bookstore. We have a few minutes left now. I wanted to ask you a question. First of all, I understand better why you dress like a figure skater. That's a very physical thing that you do.
Thank you. I actually used to figure skate and dance, but figure skating, it's a good analog to the organ, and somehow. It's very cutting, I guess.
I've read a little bit about the instrument, and the thing that struck me is that they are actually built into the edifices where you find them, right? So,
quite so.
Being a performer of the organ must be a hell of a chore. Like you can't, like a violinist, or you can't take your instrument with you.
I noticed there's a lot of sex at your conference. In the bookstore, there's all these books about sex. There's sort of, I think it's great, actually. I like to make the illustration that playing the organ, as opposed to playing the violin, with which one has a relationship. You go to Juilliard and your friends play the violin. They're all carrying the damn thing around,
right?
You see. And so they have it at 3 in the morning when their girlfriend broke up with them, or when they want to play on the street, or what have you. And so they have this deep relationship, and it's like a 25-year marriage as opposed to a one-night stand.
But what do you do about that? I know you have to tune your performance to each instrument.
The issue of the organ, as I see it going forward, is in fact also one of sustainability, and sustainability maybe artistically as well as physically. Obviously, the pipe organ is the great legacy. It's the thing that was in existence and living a more digital existence in terms of ones and zeros and complicated human creations, long before 1849 and Babbage and the analytical engine #2 and all that. And of course, the organ also worked, which Babbage's didn't. So there is this centuries-old tradition. The problem is that the organ experienced its great heyday in the 19th century when music was a kind of elitist thing in some ways. You see these pictures of these grand old concert halls, and indeed some of the concert halls of today, which architecturally are very reminiscent of the 19th century. And they're beautiful, but you realize that there's a kind of inbuilt, attitude that, of course, only the certain people, only the quality really would have access to this. And the organ was always there as part of that. What I crave more than anything, in fact, it's my abiding passion, is to create an instrument which would give me total freedom artistically and musically and geographically. So that means that I have become the world's most outspoken advocate, not a title, by the way, for which there's much competition, for the digital organ. An instrument which is in one way or another based on the pipe organ in design and concept, but the interesting thing is that, as often happens, I'm sure there are scientists in the audience who would know better and much more painful examples of this, but as sometimes happens, an invention, of course, is sort of co-opted by capitalistic forces for good or for bad. In this case, in my opinion, both, in the sense that digital organs and non-pipe organs are the most prolifically produced instruments, but they also have become such because of the market force of sort of cheap churches and people in their homes wanting something to plug in, which I'm not interested in at all. For the first time at the as I'm reaching the midpoint of my life, 30, there's this incredible breakthrough that has happened with the digital organ, which allows it to transcend even the pipe organ, in my very unique opinion.
But let me interject. Even that device is not that easy to travel with, right?
Well,
so are you talking about something that's bigger or smaller
much bigger
than that?
You see, I'm not interested in sacrificing size or anything for mobility. What I'm interested in doing is creating one instrument which can really show people what the organ, and of course, much more importantly, what the organist of the future is really possible.
So you've designed such an organ. This is an organ that will substitute software for pipes.
Well, yes, it does. It's a software-driven organ, but it actually is a sort of harvesting of the sounds of the greatest organs of the world, and therefore the preservation of them. That's one of my other things. Every time a church or a great hall burns down, inevitably some organ which someone, hand-carved in 1746 is gone. Right. And that absolutely doesn't need to exist, as we know. there can be a kind of archive, and I see no reason why that archive shouldn't be a hybrid musical instrument that brings together the best of all organ traditions, not just from North Germany in the 18th century, but from America in the 1920s when they built these decadent organs in cinemas for silent movies and so on. And this is, my great dream is to build 2 of these machines, one of which, they will be identical. One will live in Berlin and one in Boston, so that I live in Berlin, so that the idea is that everything that I do, you know, when I've played 2 hours on this machine, I don't know it. I try to give my best, but it's a one-night stand, a quickie at best. And so this machine, you know, I would go on tour having spent a year working on the tour, and anything that I did on one organ would propagate to the other, so I could play the same way and with the same passion and fervor and conviction in Boston and Berlin and in Waco and in Mönchengladbach.
So how far have you gotten with this project?
Funding. That's the issue, Moses.
It's always the issue. So is this an entrepreneurial project of your own? You're trying to build this yourself?
Well, I'm at the head of it, but I have a lot of really great people behind me who want to see it come hell or high water. And if anything, they're actually restraining me from actually selling my soul. But the genius of this is that the entire project is less than a violin, a Stradivarius or Guarneri. It costs $1.5 million not only to build 2 organs, but to put them in a studio where I could teach and play with young organists, explore, and continually make a kind of organ laboratory, which of course would propagate to wherever the organ was set up. It also makes it possible to play in deepest Russia, in Africa, in prisons and in schools, and on an instrument which not only would be musically comprehensive, but which would be the greatest organ in the world. This is my dream. Thank you.
If you had a prospectus, you might sell a few shares here. Tell me, what are these devices?
Well, and
Can we see on this
you see on this screen, you know, it's not an easy thing to build a great organ, and what I'm proposing is building a great organ night after night. And so these devices are the speaker trees. There are 8 of them, and they're robotic machines, which when they're fully deployed, each one of them takes 6 very special speakers up about 30 feet, and the white things are subwoofers, basically. And so these can be deployed.
They were chairs. They're not chairs.
They're sort of chairs for the system, actually. But they hold it up, but they also provide the bass. Because, of course, the place that digital organs always fall down is they don't have sonic architecture. We need geography of sound and distance and height and elevation, and that's what this gives us. It also makes it possible to simply roll the things off the truck and set them up in about 2 hours' time. And of course, the console, when fully assembled, would be intimidating on the stage of Carnegie Hall, but it breaks down into parts, not more than 100 pounds each, say, that then can be, you know, handled by stagehands. And the whole thing actually ends up working fairly easily.
And does it all sit on the platform with you, or
It's wherever you want it to be. This is the thing. The great rule of the pipe organ is it's there. It doesn't move. And there could be no greater metaphor for me than inverting that and making the damn thing travel a lot. So that's my dream, and thank you for listening.
Cameron Carpenter. Good night.